The three most common painful movements that I've seen throughout my years, and anytime I say this, I've talked to many other experienced and successful trainers with really good client retention, and this seems to be the consensus, is the knee bending type movement. So it's not uncommon to have clients that doing squats and lunges and split squats in the traditional manner that those exercises are done in, that they say that kind of hurts their knee. Now, sometimes it doesn't hurt them until they reach a certain depth, right? If they stay above that depth, they're fine, but there's a limitation there. That's pretty common. Probably the most common movement that we see people have issues with is vertical overhead pressing, right? It's either that their form stinks, whether it's like all lower back and they lean back as they press, or it just kills their shoulder. And I would say probably just as common is, actually not just as common, almost as common, is not being able to do certain horizontal pressing exercises, mainly bench press, and then to a lesser common degree, dumbbell press. I've had a lot of clients that say they can't do bench press, but they can do dumbbell press and push-ups. Then the other people will say, I can't do push-ups, dumbbell press, or bench press, right? And if you've been training for a while, I'm sure you know this very well. Now, those are the three most common painful areas that we deal with. Now, the obvious answer to that is just simply, modify these movements or substitute for another upper body exercise. So let me be a little bit more specific. If someone can't do knee bending exercises, then we do have some modifications. I'm going to talk about those in a brief bit, but I would just say work within the range of motion they can do. That's if they can do some level of range of motion to get that movement. If they just basically say all those movements are out, I got you covered here with what we call joint-friendly strength training. Vertical pushing, if they just say, hey, that's it, whether their form stinks, it's all lower back, or they can't do anything overhead without it killing their shoulder or shoulders, then you go to diagonal pressing. And that's the default there. Let's say they can't do diagonal pressing, then you just eliminate vertical and diagonal pressing off the list and substitute whatever type of exercise, maybe one more isolation exercise there, or another compound movement if you think that they want to do double up on hip extension for whatever, hip hinge or a knee bend for whatever reason. And that for these cases, usually I only do one of the main movements and I'll just add more isolation exercises in that case. And then same thing with horizontal pressing. If they can't do that, then you can just eliminate that entirely or use joint-friendly strength training concepts. We'll get there in a moment. We're about there now. And then just simply eliminate that and substitute another, form of isolation training in there. Now, keep in mind, if they can't do a horizontal pressing, there's a lot of front delt work involved with that. So it might be a good idea to bring in some other delt work as isolation exercises to substitute for that lack of front delt work they're not getting from the horizontal press. Now, hip hinging is often less times, from my experience and the experience of a lot of successful trainers that I've had the pleasure of working with, and keep in mind that's a lot given the fact that I get to speak all over the world, is hip hinging is often a technique issue, right? So where they don't have any pain, but they can't quite get that hip back disassociation, right? And they're kind of that hunchback, and you spend a lot of time trying to work with them on their technique. Now, some people can pick up the technique right away with a little bit of coaching. And I've seen trainers do all kinds of things. They put the dowel on the spine and different, and that sometimes works for people. Other times it doesn't help at all, right? In those cases, then hip hinging is not on the table right now, at least for them, but you can do what I would call hybrid deadlifts, right? Which is like a partial hip hinge, partial squat type movement, right? So we have some exercises in our database there. Band hybrid deadlifts, upright dumbbell hybrid deadlifts. Those are the situations, or things like a trap bar. We call it a trap bar squat. It could be considered a deadlift. So there's other ways to work around that issue where it's not a fully parallel torso at the bottom of the lift.